Hello everyone and welcome once more to the UKGN podcast. I'm Zoidberg, your host for this weekly rundown of what's been happening in the world of gaming. On the eve of this year's E3, the annual celebration of how well the video game industry is doing, we're reminded of what happens at the opposite end of the scale. This week, the news emerged that Minecraft Story Mode will be disappearing from all digital stores at the end of the month. And even if you own it, you'll no longer be able to re-download the episodes to your account. It's been nearly a year since Telltale Games closed for good, and only last month it was revealed that the company's entire back catalogue would no longer be available to purchase on GOG. This is another cautionary tale of why the bold digital future might not be as good as the industry wants us to believe. It seems like we can't go longer than a couple of weeks without news of games being removed from digital stores, and sometimes they just disappear without fanfare. As big retro gamers ourselves, we like being able to buy and play games from 20 or 30 years ago, but feel that this won't be possible with most of today's releases. Minecraft Story Mode was another enjoyable entry in the Telltale canon, managing to squeeze a compelling narrative out of a game that had none, so it's sad that it won't be available anymore. I've seen it argued that physical copies still exist, but if I remember correctly, the disc versions of Telltale releases only contained the opening episode, and still required you to download the rest. The closure of any studio is a sad day for the industry, but for their legacy to be gone forever as well, it's a tragedy. In honour of Telltale Games' output, we now present our countdown of the top 5 games from their history. Get them while you still can. Monkey Island 1 and 2 are rightly heralded as two of the best adventure games ever made, so Tales of Monkey Island had a lot to live up to, and although the quality wavers slightly in a couple of the episodes, it just about manages it. It's a definite improvement on Escape from Monkey Island anyway. Across the 5 episodes, the storyline goes to places that you wouldn't expect, and you're never more than a minute away from a well-written gag or an amusing Easter egg. Visually, it hasn't aged very well, but the writing and voice acting more than make up for it. The original Sam & Max was released between Day of the Tentacle and Full Throttle, and doesn't quite get the love it deserves. For me, it's the best game of the 3, and Telltale managed to improve on it through 6 fantastic episodes. Save the World was the series that proved releasing games in episodes was a viable option for gamers, and I can remember eagerly awaiting the arrival of each new instalment over the course of the year. The banter between the central characters is always funny, but what makes it great is that it never seems forced. With the imminent arrival of Borderlands 3, it's no surprise that 2K Games are trying to get Tales from the Borderlands relisted on Steam. It's a brilliant, funny and surprising expansion of the universe that Gearbox Software created, and something that every fan should play. It also showed that Telltale knew how to construct an action sequence, something that they hadn't done before at this point. The quality remains consistently high throughout all 5 episodes, and you'll laugh out loud on more than one occasion in each. The Walking Dead Season 1 introduced the template that would become the company's trademark, with players forced to make extremely difficult decisions throughout. By the final episode, I had different people alive in my story due to the choices that I'd made than some of my friends did, although the story's ultimate devastating conclusion was the same for everyone. The reason the sequels didn't work quite as well is because they put you in control of Clementine, and for me, she works better as a character that I didn't want to disappoint, rather than one who made her own decisions. Based on Fables, a little-known DC Comics series, The Wolf Among Us should have been nothing more than an interesting curiosity. Thanks to the fantastic plot and sterling voice work, it's much more than that. Episode 1 ended with the shocking death of someone who we had assumed would be one of the main characters to the story, and the twist just kept coming from there. Telltale's demise came at a time when the long-awaited second season had finally been announced, and the fact that we'll now never get to see it is heartbreaking. Now it's time for this week's news. One of the greatest games ever made is currently free for all Xbox Gold subscribers. Portal Still Alive was the Xbox Live Arcade re-release for the famed first-person puzzler, allowing players to enjoy it at a low price without having to buy the orange box. You get the full game in all its glory, as well as a selection of challenge rooms to test what you've learned. If you've never played it, then you really should download it immediately. As far as the rest of June's lineup goes, it's all pretty forgettable. NHL 19 is great, but something that we already got via EA Access. Earth Defense Force 2017 is not as good as last month's Insect Armageddon, and Rivals of Ether is yet another poor pixel art Smash Brothers clone. Let's hope for some surprising announcements during the Xbox conference on Sunday. The fight against the Bido Empire will continue next year after a new entry in the R-Type series was floated on Kickstarter on Monday. Unsurprisingly, R-Type Final 2 managed to achieve its funding in just 2 days, and now has a great new trailer which offers glimpses of some very familiar looking gameplay. There's no release date yet, but expect it to be next year at the earliest. But whenever it arrives, it will be the first entry in the series since 2003, and should launch on Xbox One, PS4, Switch and PC. Knowing that the game exists and is coming is enough to get our excitement levels up, but please don't let it take too long. We're going to save some of the big announcements made this week for next Friday's E3 roundup. June is always a slow month for games releases, so we've only had 3 new games to review this week. Trover Saves the Universe continues the great month for PlayStation VR, with both Everybody's Golf and Blood and Truth already impressing us. It comes from Justin Roiland, who also created Rick and Morty, and it's like you're living inside a cartoon. The most swear-filled cartoon since South Park, but a cartoon all the same. It's rude, often hilarious, and even occasionally offensive, with some great character designs and an inventive use of VR. Unfortunately, it's let down slightly by the gameplay itself, which is the same standard combination of platforming and combat that you'd expect from the LEGO games, ultimately lacking in variety. While VR is definitely the recommended way to play it, it's also possible to play on your TV, with the right stick on your controller handling the direction you're looking. However you decide to play it, it's enjoyable and doesn't outstay its welcome, and if you so desire, there's even an option to play a censored version which bleeps out all the expletives. Nippon Ichi's Lapis Labyrinth is to gamers what a laser pointer is to a cat. There are times when it's not clear what's happening or what you're meant to be doing, but the game distracts you with showers of coloured gems so you don't mind in the slightest. Essentially, you control a team of warriors who work together as a stack, and you have to fight your way through a series of platform levels without dying. I played it for many hours and I actually still couldn't tell you what the story is or the point of it all, but I've also thoroughly enjoyed every minute. Every time it felt like boredom was about to set in, another fever time would kick in, and I'd get lost in the frantic battle to collect as many gems as possible. Finally this week we have Red Siren Space Defense, and just because a game is released for a low price doesn't mean that it has to appear cheap. This Switch version doesn't get off to a very good start though, as it doesn't even have a title screen, instead opting to load straight into the game's map screen. It's a re-release of a game that appeared on mobile devices back in December, and unfortunately nothing has been done to update the gameplay. It's a fairly bog standard twin-stick shooter, only with the slight novelty of being viewed side-on rather than from above. The graphics are quite decent, but the gameplay is overly repetitive and the levels are too short. There's simply nothing here to recommend. As always, we end the show with our pick for Retro Game of the Week. Solomon's Key is the latest game to be released in the Arcade Archive series on the Nintendo Switch, and it brought back great memories of playing the excellent Spectrum version back in 1986. The conversion was an early effort by Rafael Checo, who would go on to make Exelon, Cybernoid and First Samurai, and it was perhaps my first experience of playing a proper puzzle game on home computer. The arcade original was transferred in its entirety, without the need for multi-load, and the graphics, although limited by the Spectrum's colour palette, were clear and uncluttered. I absolutely loved the Spectrum version, and it wasn't until years later that I played it in the arcades, and fully appreciated what an excellent conversion it was. And that's the end of the show. Do you remember playing Solomon's Key? Tell us what you thought about it, or anything else that we've discussed this week, in the comments. We'll be back next Friday at 7 PM with a look back at anything exciting that happens during E3, as well as our usual reviews of the latest games. If you're watching on YouTube, give us a like and subscribe to make sure you don't miss it, and follow us on Facebook and Twitter at UK Gaming Network. Thanks for joining us, see you next time.